So last week we finished 1 John, and that was a journey. We took a little while to make our way through 1 John, and I hope you enjoyed the study along the way. And what I thought we would do, I feel a long way from you. Let's scoot this up a little bit. What I thought we would do over the next, we've got 3 Wednesday nights before Christmas, and then I'm not sure about the Wednesday after Christmas what we're going to do, but I thought we would take a look at the Gospel of Luke and the Christmas account. The messages on Sunday morning throughout Advent are centered around themes this year. And they're basically the themes of our Advent candle lightings, and the theme of hope and the theme of peace, which we've looked at so far. This Sunday is going to be the theme of love, and then the last Sunday, joy, and of course we light the Christ candle on Christmas Eve. So we really aren't going to be, quote, going through the actual story of Christmas. So Pastor Roger asked a question with a group of people he was with recently, and I'm going to ask you the same question. If you're going to read about the gospel accounts of the birth of Jesus, where would you go? Luke. But I already said that part, didn't I? Dave gave that one away. Where else would you look in the Gospels? Matthew. Yes. Those are really the 2 that hit it head on. Mark, he's so excited about Jesus' ministry, he just jumps into Jesus' ministry. And he's figured everybody else has got the birth covered. And I love how John does it. He kind of, I call it the cosmic view. He's looking at it late in his life. He's looking at it from the big picture. How the Word, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he goes from that to verse 14 when he says, in John 1, when he says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. So I love how the Gospels look at this story. And so we're going to take a look at Luke, and we're going to go a little ways tonight, and then we'll pick back up and just keep going with it as we go along for the next few weeks. So one of the things that strikes you, has anybody been reading? I haven't asked you to, but it is Advent season. Has anybody been reading in Luke 1 in your devotions? Well, good. That's not good. I guess it's good for here, but this will encourage you to do that. One of the things we want to remember, and I don't want to dwell too long on this, maybe just a minute or two. The last prophet was Malachi, somewhere in the neighborhood of 430 BC. So we're talking about 430 years where, quote unquote, there hasn't been a biblical prophetic voice. There hasn't been a prophet that we find in the Scripture in that time. Now, a lot obviously happened in that intertestament time. As a matter of fact, can you tell me some things that came out of the intertestament time that we discover in the New Testament that you don't read about in the Old Testament? Anything jump to mind? Synagogues. Yeah, you don't read about synagogues in the Old Testament, right? But all of a sudden, they're quite prevalent in the New Testament.
The second coming? Is that one of them?
We read a lot more about the second coming in the New Testament, but it's actually referred to in the Old Testament as well. How about, you ever hear of the Pharisees in the Old Testament? Sadducees, the Essenes. A lot happened. There was a Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And remember what that's called? Septuagint, absolutely. And you remember why that came about? Why did they take the Hebrew scriptures and translate it into the Greek? The Gentiles, and it was a largely Greek influence. And the folks needed it in their language. So if you think about it, at the end of the Old Testament, what nation, empire is in charge of the land of Israel? The Persians. Persians, right? The Persians had defeated the Babylonians, who had defeated the Assyrians, and now we've got the Persians at the end of the Old Testament. Well, who wiped out the Persians or drove them out of the Middle East? The Greeks. Alexander the Great. Absolutely. Alexander the Great. And when Alexander the Great, I did this with Frontline a couple weeks ago, by the way. And they were right there with me. I thought I'd lose them fast, but they were with me. Right after Alexander died young. He was not very old. He was in his 30s, I think. I did not double check that. But I'm pretty sure he was in his 30s when he died. And the Greek Empire was divided into 4 sections. Now the 2 that matters to us, that bounced back and forth with control over Palestine or over Israel, were the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. We just talk about them all the time, don't we? The Ptolemies and the Seleucids. Where were the Ptolemies? Do you remember? You ever heard of them?
Were they in Egypt?
They were in Egypt, absolutely. Ptolemies were in Egypt, and the Seleucids were up in what we would refer to as Syria. Okay? And if you look at a map, and if you look in your Bible even at a map, you'll see that Jerusalem and the land we know as Israel was right smack dab in the middle of those 2. And control bounced back and forth between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And in 168 BC, the Seleucids were in control. And there was a guy, and you've heard me mention him before because I find him kind of interesting. Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Kind of gave himself that name. It means God manifest. He thought rather highly of himself. And he came into Jerusalem and he put the clamp on Judaism and he tried to stamp it out. He burned the scriptures and destroyed the scriptures. He was arresting and murdering the Jewish leaders. He went into the temple and literally put up a statue of Zeus, sacrificed a pig on the altar, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And there was a group called the Maccabees that rose up in rebellion. And the general, the leader of that group, was a man named Judas Maccabeus. And he has a great nickname. And if you're going to play middle linebacker in the NFL, you want this nickname. It's the Hammer. And he led an uprising. And basically they defeated and ran off the Seleucids. And within a few years developed what was known as the Hasmonean Dynasty. Now you can Google that and look at that. The Hasmonean Dynasty. And for about 100 years, close to the 100 years, the Israelites were able to control their own destiny. But in 63 BC, the Romans came through under Pompey. And when the Romans came through, they took control and didn't give it back. And that's where we find ourselves coming into the pages of the New Testament. So a lot happened in that intertestament time. And it's fascinating because as you come to Luke 1, 400 plus years is a long time. Malachi was a long time off. And it's hard to describe and even to understand, because I can't, what the mindset had to be at that point in time under Roman authority. But we come to Luke chapter 1. We find a priest named Zechariah. And he is having what very well could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to serve as a priest literally in the temple. And he is actually inside. You remember the temple was divided into the holy place and the most holy place. The holy place was where the altar of incense was. There was the bread of presence. There was the candelabra of the light of God. Those were 3 main things in there. And the altar of incense was right pretty close to in front of the curtain that divided the holy place from the most holy place. Do you remember what the incense symbolized? The smoke from the incense. Yeah, the prayers of the people. Going before the Lord. And of course, again, symbolically, on the other side of that curtain, you've got the ark itself. Symbolic of the Holy of Holies in the presence of God. And the prayers are rising before him. And literally, when he was in there serving, there were crowds of people outside praying. So, as we come to verse 11 of Luke 1, it says that an angel of the Lord appeared to Zechariah, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you're to give him the name John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He's never to take wine or other fermented drink. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from birth. And many of the people of Israel will he bring back to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Now you got to keep something in mind here with Zechariah. He and Elizabeth were well past the age of having children. Verse 7, it says they're both well along in years. And one of the things they had grieved in their lives, not able to have a child. And all of a sudden, here's this angel. Just try to put yourself in that place. Any of you who are 65, 70, a little older, which there's only one or two of you, imagine an angel telling you you are going to become a father or a mother. And you hadn't been able to. Now, one of the things that strikes me about this, he's going to give him the name John. And John means the Lord is gracious. Isn't that a beautiful name for the child that is going to prepare the way? The Lord is gracious. Now, if you look in verses 14 through 17, if you look, we just read them. If you look at verses 14 through 17, what does Zechariah tell him that catches your eye about this child? There are some things he says very specifically.
Turn the hearts of the fathers to their children.
Turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, which is a literal quote from Malachi 4:6. We might even take a peek at that. Larry, did you say something?
What's your question? Who says what to who?
As what does Gabriel say to Zechariah about this baby that's going to be born?
That he goes before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah.
He goes before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, right? Elijah. Which Malachi talks about, and also what his purpose is also described in Isaiah 40, which we might take a look at that in a few minutes after business meeting. You know what catches my eye? Is when he says, he will be a joy and a delight to you. Now, I got a confession. Not like I had Monday night. I've got a confession. And that is, when I think of John the Baptist, I don't particularly think of somebody that's going to be delightful and a joy. And yet, that's exactly what he's going to be to his mom and dad. And you stop and think about it even for a moment, it makes perfect sense, right? They're going to have a little boy. And they're going to watch that little boy grow up. And they know that God has his hand on him. They told him he's going to be great in the sight of the Lord. Talks about he's never going to take wine or other fermented drink, and will even be filled with the Holy Spirit from birth. more than likely what that's referring to is that there was something called a Nazarite vow. And it was a vow that a person would make before God for a specific period of time for a specific purpose. That could be any number of things. And if you go back, I think it's in Numbers, I want to say Numbers 6. I'm not going to take time to go back and look, but you can double check it. Numbers 6. And basically, you don't shave, you don't cut your hair, you don't drink wine. Matter of fact, you don't drink or eat anything from the vine. And whenever, and there are some other things you can read, but those are the major things. And whenever you're doing for the Lord is completed and your vow is finished, then you shave and you cut your hair and make offerings to the Lord. It appears that John the Baptist is going to be living according to that Nazarite vow from the beginning. So you see pictures of John the Baptist, images of what people imagine he looks like. You've got really long hair, you've got a beard that probably hasn't been trimmed or cut, all of his life. Now the only thing that's specifically mentioned there is not to drink wine or fermented drink. So that's going a little further than what it specifically says.
Yeah, it's Numbers 6:1 is where it starts.
Okay, Numbers 6:1.
6:1.
Okay. So you can read that on your own and see what that's all about. The one thing I want to say before we take a break in our Bible study and go to our business meeting, and we'll come back to this right after, is to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. What that's saying is this baby is going to prepare the way for the Messiah. Just imagine Zechariah trying to wrap his mind around that. It's been 430 years since Malachi. Okay? So, we're gonna hold it right at that point. We will come back. All right. That's what you call picking up where you left off. All right, Luke chapter 1. Want us to just do a couple of things here, and then we want to wrap up with our prayer time. We were talking about the announcement to Zechariah that Elizabeth was going to give birth to one who was going to prepare the way, and his name was going to be John, which means the Lord is gracious. And on your own, you can look up Isaiah 40 verses 3 through 5, and you can look up Malachi, the very last prophet of the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 4 verses 5 and 6, actually the last two verses of the Old Testament. And you read what the angel said to Zechariah about the baby to be born. And you look at those passages in the Old Testament, and you're going to see a very clear fulfillment of those prophecies. The thing I want us to look at here, just as we wrap things up with this part of the study, Zechariah asked the angel in Luke 1 verse 18, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man. My wife is well along in years." It's kind of interesting because he asks a question that next week we'll see Mary asking. But there's something different about what Zechariah is asking, apparently, than what Mary's asking. If you look over verse 34, which is jumping way ahead, and the angel has appeared to Mary and said she's going to give birth to the Messiah, she asks, "How will this be since I'm a virgin?" Well, let's look at Zechariah's response. And I love his response. The angel answered, "I am Gabriel." All right? Now, when Zechariah hears, I am Gabriel, what goes through his mind immediately? This is the same angel that presented himself to Daniel. I mean, we're talking almost 600 years earlier. That's just mind-boggling to me. It even gives us a little insight into angels. Gabriel has been ministering, well, at least 600 years, right? But then look what he says. I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. And I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. In other words, he has stood in the throne room of heaven. He has been in heaven itself. I stand in the presence of God. And I've been sent to you. In other words, this is a special mission. This is a really important message. And you need to understand what it's all about. Your wife is going to give birth to the one who is going to prepare the way for the Messiah. And then he says in verse 20, and now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their proper time. Now, next week, we'll take a look at how he responds to Mary's answer, and you can take a look at that. And many of you, I'm sure, are very aware of how he responded to her question to him, which sounds along the same vein, but apparently he's understanding something different. Mary's asking from how Zechariah is asking. And we'll kind of talk about that next week. Verse 21, let's just kind of read down through verse 25, and then we'll stop right there. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah. They were wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, and typically that time of service was about 2 weeks long each time, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. The Lord has done this for me, she said. In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people. A closing question. Why do you think Elizabeth chose to remain 5 months in seclusion? Any thought?
She wanted to make sure it happened.
Well, she in 5 months, she's going to be sure it's happening, just for sure. No doubt about it.
Would people have ridiculed her for being at that age? Would that have been?
I think they would have marveled, for sure.
You don't think they would have been like?
Well, I guess, and this is just me, I'm thinking they would be utterly amazed. Because Zechariah comes out of the temple, and a great crowd heard this. And then they would be seeing it happen. Any other thought?
Well, he doesn't talk to Elizabeth.
This is all through sign language. I mean, he's and writing. I'm sure there was a lot of
I
writing
mean,
going
Angel
on.
didn't talk to her, he just talked to Zachariah.
Right.
She didn't know it's even gonna happen unless Zach told her.
Well, yeah, he comes out and he's bound to tell her. Now, he can't speak it,
Yeah.
but I guarantee you he got the message across, right? And Matt?
She had to come to grips with it, with the fact that with her part in this divine story, maybe. I'm grasping at straws, but
It might have been that she didn't show very early. And 5 months, she was gonna see if she was gonna show that she was pregnant. That might have been the case. At 6 months, you're getting big. So that might have been
6 months, you're really showing, right?
sometime.
I don't know. Am I crazy to think that she spent time in worship of the Lord that she just
Dedication.
pulled aside
Prayer.
and was soaking it in, like trying to come to grips with what, I mean, is this really going to happen? And then maybe watching, feeling her body, kind of sensing what's going on, and marveling at what God has done and is doing, and in essence spent that time in preparation for, she's raising somebody that's going to prepare the way for the Lord. I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm giving her too much. I'm trying to think what I would do. That's hard for me to figure that one out, right?
That would be a miracle.
That would be a real miracle, wouldn't it? But I just, well, one of the things, and we did not read this, but if you go back, it talks about in verse 6, both of them were upright in the sight of God, observing the Lord's commandments and regulations blamelessly. In other words, they sought to walk with God. And I think she's a very deeply spiritual woman. And I just, in my mind, I just picture her for that 5-month period of time, preparing herself for what was coming and spending time growing in the Lord. And that's just me. I just find it interesting that she spent 5 months in seclusion. But verse 25, I think, gives us a hint. The Lord has done this for me. And I think it's a time of thanksgiving, a time of praise and adoration. I don't know, you might check that out, think about that, see what you come up with.
Well, wasn't in their society having a child was so very, very important?
Oh, absolutely.
And she was like Hannah. She had been childless
Yes,
for so many years.
just like Hannah. Mm-hmm. And it had been a matter of prayer in their lives for years.
And the word got out because Mary knew.
Yeah.
Her.
Yeah. And we're going to pick up right there, verse 26 next week, and Gabriel's going to make another visit about 6 months later.
You don't want to forget, you just said earlier, it's been 400 years since anything
Right.
really had happened.
You know, the greatest miracle the Jews at that point in time had experienced in the last 400 years was the Maccabean revolt.